Good evening, welcome to Canadian Orthodox Broadcasting.ca at the Canadian Orthodox Monastery of All Saints in North America. I'm speaking today with Justin Grimman, who's a delegate from the Orthodox Church to the Canadian Council of Churches Commission on Peace and Justice. And I'd like to ask you, Justin, tell us a little bit about the work of the Commission. What is it that they're actually trying to accomplish?
First of all, Valika, thank you very much for having me on your program. Concerning the work of the Commission on Justice and Peace, essentially I would say that the work is threefold. The first part of the work is a forum to allow the various different Christian churches and denominations to gather those churches that have social justice or relief and development work that they do here in Canada and abroad. Just a chance for them as members to get together and share information on what they've been doing. And then to find ways to discuss or strategize on how they can be more effective in their work. So that's one part of the tasks of the Commission. Another thing that the Commission does is public education. So they try to educate their own constituencies on the work of justice and peace work, and to prepare or develop resources for use in parishes and congregations. So, for instance, it's not uncommon for over a course of a year or two, there are various different subcommittees of the Commission will prepare different documents, whether it's on biotechnology, or issues on racial justice, or what have you. So they prepare a lot of documents for consumption for the particular various different parishes and congregations. And finally, I would say the third and oftentimes most important work that the Commission does is around advocacy work. The Commission meet once a year in Ottawa, and that affords an opportunity for members to go and meet directly with various different members of Parliament. And during the course of the year, usually there are a number of different issues that are current in the world that the Commission members are working on to address letters for submission to members of Parliament.
Mm-hmm. I wonder how much the Commission ever gets involved. There's certain women's issues in the world that I think are probably very significant, and I think far too many people are not really aware of them. And I've been thinking of things like female circumcision, and I don't think people realize the enormity of the pain and how many women die in this process. Some of them just very young girls who just reached menstrual age. And whether the Commission itself, in outreach beyond the borders of Canada, have ever addressed some of these issues.
Well, I'd probably think that the member churches and their respective relief and development arms focus on specific issues like that, and really in partnership with their sister organizations in various different parts of the world. So take, for example, like the Commission on Justice and Peace. We partner, or we have other partnerships with other Christian ecumenical groups, for instance, like Kairos. And, a group like Kairos, it's not just about them, engaged in advocacy work, but they really try to hear the voice of those in the global south and partner with fellow organizations to try and be more effective in the types of policy suggestions that they put forward to the Canadian government.
Mm. I
So-
understand that Kairos got at least underfunded, if not
Mhm.
defunded,
Mhm.
recently. Can you shed any light on that?
Well, I mean, I think in the current climate, I mean, the current government is engaged in different, I mean, just probably a change of focus in terms of where it's going, in terms of its perspective on funding, whether it's social justice organizations or even Christian relief or international development organizations. So it's not just Kairos that's been affected. There have been other organizations, Christian organizations, that have been affected. More than that, I mean, I don't know if I have a lot that I can say on that. I mean, it just means that these type of organizations are going to find more creative and more strategic ways to do their work. I mean, and I would say probably try to mobilize more people on the grassroots to support their work if they can't find funding from the federal government.
There's also been a perception that I've come across sometimes that perhaps the Orthodox Church has not been particularly involved in social justice issues and the kind of, both internally and beyond the borders, but within the country as well. That, the Canadian Archdiocese of the OCA made representation to the federal government, for instance, in defense of the Insight Center, the safe injection site,
Right.
as a part of the harm reduction program. And we didn't get the support of other jurisdictions of the Orthodox Church. But because some of them back off from social justice issues. And I wonder is that a perception that might be accurate, that there's not particularly much involvement in it?
Well, I mean, certainly, I mean, the reasons for the lack of engagement on various different social issues by whether it's various different Canadian Orthodox churches or even in the United States, there are many reasons for that phenomenon. I would say that, I mean, on one hand, like when you look at our fellow Orthodox churches, for example, in Europe or even in Russia, and even the Ecumenical Patriarchate, you'd find churches and representatives from those churches that are very engaged in various different social and political issues that impact contemporary society. So it's not something that's intrinsic to Orthodox churches per se. Here in Canada, I would submit that, still, I mean, even though, Orthodoxy has been in Canada for, I think, close to 200 years, there's still a lot of need to grow into what kind of public role that Orthodoxy should take in this continent. I would say that many, if you talk to various different individual Orthodox Christians, clergy, and even hierarchs, they are very much aware of certain issues that impact their community. I mean, certainly around refugee issues. I know, and also other issues that both the Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches share around issues around the boundary of state and church, as it impacts education, as it impacts marriage, and even I think there was an issue around marriage commissioners as well. So those are all timely issues that many Orthodox clergy and hierarchs are interested in and very much aware of.
Yeah.
Along the other, more conventionally social justice issues, I would say that one of the things I was a part of over the last number of years on the Commission of Justice and Peace was around the issue of human trafficking. And so that was one issue that received some traction among Orthodox clergy, with the awareness, of course, that women are trafficked from the Ukraine. In Canada, a lot of Indigenous women are impacted by trafficking, and of course, Southeast Asia. So, but I'm hopeful that over time, as the churches come into their own and they realize that yes we have maybe one eye looking back on the old country, but we're really we are citizens of this great country of ours, and that we have a stake in what happens here, and the issues that impact all of us as citizens. And so I think increasingly you will see in the future more Orthodox participation.
Yeah, we should kind of hope that we would. One quite impressed by the ecumenical patriarch's involvement in ecology programs, and in Romania, where so many of the monasteries, actually some of the nuns have gone back to university and become medical doctors,
right,
and open medical clinics in the monasteries. And there's been a great response in Eastern Europe, especially,
right,
to social issues, but not just to talking about them or forming commissions, but actually hands-on response to some of these issues.
right.
That has really been very impressive, and rather hoping we see a little more of that here in North America to try to actually resolve these. And you're here for the Orthodox Peace Fellowship Conference, and what did you think of the conference overall?
Well, I was very excited about being able to participate in the Orthodox Peace Fellowship Conference. I had been a member of the OPF a number of years ago. Very much been impressed by the work of Jim Forrest, and read the journal In Communion enthusiastically. So when I heard that there was going to be an OPF conference here in Canada, well, that's not an event that I want to miss. Yeah. So I was delighted about the conference. The issues that were discussed, the issues on Canada's or Christian or Orthodox Christians' engagement on issues related to peacemaking in Palestine, Israel, very timely. Concerns about peacemaking in Iran, again, very significant discussions that have taken place. I think one of the most important things that I received from attending the conference was this reaching out, seeing a face of people who are Orthodox Christian and wholly engaged in the issues on justice and peace. And that to me is very uplifting, very encouraging. Another thing that I found, I was thinking about some of the words that you said, Vladika, and also Jim Forrest, and just in terms of how do we acquire, reiterating what Saint Seraphim of Sarov taught us in terms of acquiring a spirit of peace. So often in social justice work, people have a very activistic mentality or bent where they want to go out and change the world. They're whether it's through, and I see it at, let's say, even at the work of the commission. I see it in basically among secular activists, and they're very focused on being able to be aware of all the different ills of our society and going out and trying to change laws, and oftentimes forgetting that the first thing that we need to change is change our heart, right? And what skills, what techniques do we have to do that? And one thing I like about the Orthodox Peace Fellowship is that whole spiritual aspect, the whole work on the inner self, the whole ascetic tradition of Orthodoxy is not lost as we discuss these pressing issues. And again, that's what I really valued in attending.
One of the things that strikes me with a lot of peace movements, but certainly with governments, and governments are the ones that do cause all the trouble, but is not trying to find out what the story is from the other side. It seems one kind of takes a side, but I was rather impressed with Ron Paul down in America during the Republican debates
Right.
on his foreign policy.
Right.
And the one thing that interested me the most is he, like a few others, say, why don't we just find out what's setting off the other side? Why don't we find out what their complaints are? And why don't we find out how much we're making the matter worse? And see if we can't start there by responding to some of their fears and their complaints. And instead of invading somebody's country, let's see if we can't work out something with them by finding out why they're afraid of the West, or why they're responding the way they're responding, or what their fears are that drive their actions, and try to listen to the other story enough to respond to it.
Very important. It's one of the things I learned many years ago. I did conflict mediation training. One of the first things they teach you is about actively listening, hearing what the other person is saying to you. We had a really good example of that at the conference where we had the young woman who, her and her husband went over and spent 3 years in Iran. And she's I guess from the Mennonite Central Committee. And there was an exchange program between her and her husband, and she spent 3 years doing a theological degree in Shia theology. And then I guess 3 or 2 Shia clerics came to Canada and studied at a Canadian university studying Christian theology.
I remember that.
And what was amazing is this talking about all the misperceptions that we have of what Shia Islamic tradition is, and what's transpired in Iran. And she spent a number of years there, and she developed a great love for the people. And in fact, she was talking about continuing on and doing a doctorate in Persian literature. So I found that very thought-provoking and very interesting. And I'm interested in going on and reading her book that she's written on the topic, and maybe getting in contact with her. So I was really inspired by that.
There are always these misconceptions when the Arabs first tried to introduce the Quran to Iran. And they wrote to them and told them that they had to give up paganism and become monotheists. And actually, I don't remember who actually wrote back, but he said, we've been monotheists for 1,000 years. Of course, the next door neighbors didn't know that, didn't realize that Zoroastrianism was a monotheistic religion, and that they had a book. But they were a religion of the book as well.
Right.
And, sometimes when the West talks in a condescending way to a culture like Iran that's been around before the West was even populated.
Right.
As we say, when people in the West were still batting each other in the head with clubs, they already had a civilization. And to try to talk in a condescending way to an ancient tradition or civilization that's produced the monumental art and things like this, it seems rather absurd, because we're talking with really highly cultured people there.
Indeed.
And that's so part of the issue seems to be, first of all, not knowing who we're talking to, and secondly, not paying attention to their story.
Exactly.
And otherwise, maybe we could see how we could work this out.
That's right.
That's one of the
one of the other themes that really hit home for me was just the whole focus on, who is our enemy? And likewise, I mentioned when I did a brief presentation on the Canadian Council of Churches that a new Christian interfaith reference group has a new resource called "Who is Our Neighbor?" But the whole thing about whether it's our enemy or our neighbor, do we know who that person is? We have a misperception of who they are. And it's interesting, whether it's Jim or another speaker talked about the fact that oftentimes, there's a whole cycle or pattern where we end up, we don't know, we fear our neighbor, or we fear this enemy, then we demonize that person, and pretty soon we're working to try and dehumanize them and destroy them, right? And so what for me is very exciting is just that whole discussion at the Orthodox Peace Fellowship on that theme, and how to be really aware, because in Christ really we have no enemies.
No.
Right?
You know, when we use the term the enemy in divine services, we're always talking about Satan.
Right,
We're
exactly.
always talking about the devil. We're not talking about human beings
That's
or
right.
people.
That's right.
But generally, neighbors don't turn into enemies just on their own. Sometimes we provoke that.
Right, right.
And
right.
we need to take responsibility for what we've provoked as well.
Exactly.
And realize that we became enemies with the people who became enemies with us somehow. Both sides in it. And as we were discussing, well, there might not be two sides to every story, but there are two different stories very often.
That's
And
right.
the two stories need to be taken into account. So I'm rather hoping both the OPF and the Peace and Justice Commission will really develop those things a lot. So.
Well, one of the encouraging things that I hope will come out of my involvement with the OPF is to get OPF participants and members to be more engaged specifically with a number of Christian ecumenical groups.
Yeah.
The
Yes, sir.
Commission on Justice and Peace is one.
We could almost have another discussion on ecumenism, because something else that's often very misunderstood, and that a lot of people are afraid of. And, well, you know, fear feeds on itself.
That's right.
And it's very hungry. And it devours almost everything around it. So we could practically have a discussion on that sometime. But at the moment we're out of time, and we thank you, Justin Grimmett from Toronto, one of our readers from the Toronto Orthodox community, and a representative of the Orthodox Church in the Peace and Justice Commission of the Canadian Council of Churches, and now hopefully an active member of the Orthodox Peace Fellowship. Thank you all for joining us, and let's hear from you, your questions and other issues that you'd like to see raised in connection with what we've discussed this evening. So thank you all, and God bless you.